This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends collection. This interview was originally conducted on August the 25th, 1970. This interview is conducted by Mr. Pendleton Woods. The interviewee is Mrs. A. W. White of Oklahoma City. This interview is being re-recorded on October the 21st, 1985, for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
This is Penn Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends. The date is August 25th, 1970. I'm at the home of Mrs. A.W. White of Oklahoma City, whose mother was the first school teacher in Oklahoma City. We'll be talking about, reminiscing about some of the observations she may have from her mother, any other background information she has, and about her father, who was one of the founders of the First Baptist Church of Oklahoma City. Both of her parents came to Oklahoma City in 1889 and are 89ers. Mrs. White herself is a member of the 89ers organization as a past president of it, and we'll talk briefly about the 89er organization itself. Mrs. White, I wonder to begin with if you would tell us just a little about your parents, your mother and father, their names, and and we'll go into the background from there.
Well, of course, they were not very young when they came here. They were mature. They were married in 1889, and she was a Congregationalist and he was a Baptist, and they had planned to, they wanted to be pioneers. They'd planned it ahead of time. She was graduate of Mount Holyoke, and he was from Connecticut, so they happened to meet in Alabama, where she was teaching under the American Board Congregational People Center there. She'd been in Africa 5 or 6 years, but she was with the Methodists over there. She taught in Cape Town and started normal training schools after the pattern of Mount Holyoke.
They made the run in 1889. What made them decide to make the run?
Well, they didn't make a run. They didn't come in the run. They came 3 weeks after the run. And they knew they wanted to come and be pioneers, but they did not make the run.
Did they settle in Oklahoma City?
Oh, yes. They came direct to Oklahoma City. And been here ever since.
Did they have a land claim here?
No, they didn't claim any land. They bought property in Oklahoma City. My father was interested in real estate, and then they bought a farm down by Hara, and then he was postmaster at Hara as long as the Republicans kept him in, and then he left, and then we came back up to Oklahoma City. There were 2 kids of us, and Mother wanted us to be in school.
Your mother, I understand, and this is verified in Dr. Angelo Scott's History of Oklahoma City, which is possibly the best known of all of the histories written of Oklahoma City. Your mother was the first school teacher of Oklahoma City. Were you a student of your mother?
No, No, I was too young.
What did she teach?
She taught just when they came here to Oklahoma City and saw all these little kids running around without a school. She started a school in her own home, as any Mount Holyoke graduate would do. Just when she saw a need for school, she started one.
Where was this?
Well, it was on about 116 Northwest 5th is where the first school was, in her own home. Then there were so many that came that they bought the tent from the South Methodist Church and put it up in the yard.
Same location?
Yeah. That was part of the time. Now these different articles that I have here that I got out of the Daily Oklahoman out at the historical building tells about that.
That's very near where the YMCA is now, isn't it?
Well, the YMCA now is on 6th Street. I think the Methodist was down farther.
Oh, it's near where the First Methodist Church is now?
Somewhere there. The South Methodist Church is what is now St. Luke's, and the First Methodist Church was what they called the Northern Methodist. But of course they joined up. So these little articles that are found in the paper out at the historical building tell more than I could tell.
Well, that's fine. We'll.
She taught before I was born.
Sure. We can refer to that also. What I wanted still was to get whatever we can firsthand. Then we can refer on to the other material. Did your mother ever recall to you any of the experiences in connection with the school that you can recall?
Well, there was a storm that blew the tent down once. There's still some of those people living here in Oklahoma City that went to school to her.
Who are some of them?
Well, there's Mrs. Junior King. It used to be Junior Dunham, Junior Dunham King, and Miss Ella. Can't think of her name right now.
Are these the names we would refer to find the people, or they go by husband's name?
Well, Miss King is still here. She lives not far from here.
What's her husband? How is she listed in the phone book?
Well, I guess it would be Ms. Dunham King. Junior Dunham King.
I see.
Because she's been a widow for a good many years.
Who else can you think of in that first class?
Well, I can't think of this Miss Ella's name. This Ella that I'm trying to think of her last name. Her brother was William, and he was the first Catholic priest ordained in Oklahoma. And he and my father took the first census in Oklahoma City.
What year was that?
Oh, I wouldn't know.
1990?
I guess it'd be. I don't know whether it was 89 or 90. But
did they ever recall any experiences regarding that census that you heard?
Well, I don't remember.
Now, your father also was one of the founders of the First Baptist Church.
Yes, he and Mr. Thompson went around from house to house, and they found, I believe it was 21 Baptists, and they called a meeting. And my father was the first clerk of the First Baptist Church, and there were 2 deacons, and he was one of the deacons.
Where were they located at that time?
Well, I believe it was on the Baptist church started upstairs over some store, and then they built a building. I believe that was on Second, close to Broadway, or between Robinson and Broadway.
I presume First Baptist was organized, and the history book will show in 1889. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I believe so. Most churches were started
That first month, actually.
First year.
Now, your mother was Congregational?
That's right.
What church did you go to?
I go to the Congregational Church.
Did you, when you were growing up, were you in the
Yes,
Congregational?
I've always been in the Congregational Church. We were just two of us. My sister was turned Baptist because when she went away from Oklahoma City, it wasn't in the Congregational Church, so she joined the Baptist because my father was Baptist.
You were Pilgrim Congregational.
That's right.
Tell us about the early days of the Pilgrim Congregational.
Well, I'm supposed to be the historian, but I have to refer to my papers. I can't remember dates.
Sure. Well, I mean, without dates, could you describe the building at when you were first remember the church?
Well, they were located on Noble and Harvey, and I guess Noble would be Southwest Third now.
Correct.
And they met in a feed store while their church building was being built. The feed store, Mr. Denny's feed store, was on Washington and Harvey. Washington's Southwest Second now. And they met in the feed store, sat on bales of hay.
Where was the first building itself?
Well, it was on Noble and Harvey.
Oh, I see. The first one they actually built.
They've actually built, And the first kindergarten in Oklahoma City was taught in the basement of the Congregational Church.
Did your mother teach there?
No, she quit teaching when she had children. No, Miss, can't even think of her name now, but Edna Mae Lindsay, Miss Lindsay, was the first kindergarten teacher.
When do you know when the public schools began here?
Well, I guess they began next year, I believe.
Probably about 1890 then. Could you tell us a little about the 89ers organization? You have been a member of it a long time, although you are not an 80. You are.
Well, I'm a descendant. Well, they're still going, and anyone that was in these 5 or 6 counties in 1889 are eligible, and we have a good going organization. We don't like to call it club exactly. It's more of a society or organization.
Did you, could you tell about some of the activities that they've had? I know that they have the big 89ers parade at Guthrie. Have had, I believe that they did they not have that last year?
Well, our organization doesn't seem to promote those things. We are invited to enter into those parades and things, but we don't promote a parade, as I know of. We usually are invited to ride in the parade.
Have you ridden in it?
No. I'd stay out of those things.
Who are some of the actual 89ers who are still left here? Members who actually made the run of 89?
Oh, I'd have to get my little book out to get those names. But there are a few of the original 89ers that came. And every once in a while, well, at our banquet, at our annual banquet, they're usually asked to stand, maybe say something about their getting here in 1889.
Now, in 1970, how many of those would you say you have come to a banquet? About how many?
Well, we have, I expect, as many as 200 come to our banquet, but anybody's invited to come.
But those who stand as 89ers, what would you guess would be the number?
Well, there'd only be 12 or 15.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall any personal experiences that your parents have related dealing with the early days of Oklahoma City that might be of interest, or of events that you feel might have some interest?
Well, I know my mother, they had Chautauqua. She was instigator of that, and she had literature, and they call that the first study club in Oklahoma City. And there's a notice in one of those early day 89er papers said that Mrs. North now has literature that she'd like to distribute to the different ones for reading. And so they call that was the first literary club organized here.
Will you ever remember that club?
Oh, no, I wasn't. I wasn't born then.
No, but I wondered, did that club survive?
I don't think it was those Chautauquas you don't hear much about.
You've been active in a number of things. You are a historian of your church, I believe, and are past president. Now, what else have you been active in?
Well, I used to teach school and for a few years.
Where did you teach?
But I taught down in Indian Territory where my father had gone down there.
This is eastern Oklahoma.
At Okla.
At Okla.
And so I belong to a good many organizations, but I don't take an active part anymore. I had 5 children. I thought my business was to keep them educating and getting them educated and cultured. And I'm glad I got them raised before dope got so prevalent around. I wouldn't know what to do. But I thought it was my business to take care of them. So I was active in PTAs, and in fact, I guess I belonged to 4 or 5 at one time, same time.
What years did you teach at Okla?
Oh, that'd be prior to 1915.
Could you describe the schools at that time, and particularly the school at Okla where you taught, a little about the physical arrangement?
Oh, well, the first 3 schools I taught was in the country. In fact, the first school, there were just 2 teachers. I taught the primary. And we didn't have anything. We had outdoor toilets, and we had coal stove, and I carried coal in a bucket from where I boarded to start a fire, such stuff as that. My children wouldn't understand anything about what I was talking about.
What was the size of your school?
Well, I think I had 25 little kids in the lower grades.
You had several grades in one
Oh,
classroom.
yes, oh, yes. And you had to use your own ingenuity. You didn't have a supervisor telling you just how to do it, and we didn't have equipment like they have nowadays.
How many rooms did you have in the country school?
Well, I was two, just two.
One
rooms.
for each teacher?
That's right.
No principal?
No, well, I suppose the teacher of the upper grades probably was considered the principal of the school, but I told him about as much what to do as he did me. We worked together, and that was these schools where you had a summer session because the kids have to work in the crops, and I know there's some schools like that right now. At cotton time, the kids had to be out. We didn't have school till the cotton was harvested.
What sort of school board or administration did you have organizing the district?
Well, I suppose just like any country school now, they're all friendly people, and I remember they wanted me to have a night school for adults, and so I undertook to do that, and I thought I never had training in adult teaching, but I thought I had to start with A, start with the first letter in the alphabet. So I struck a great big A off on the blackboard, and I said, now that's A. And one fellow said, my God, is that A? So I didn't keep that up very long. I'm sorry now that I didn't, because I can see that they did want. There were some of them that could not read and write, but I was pretty young. I was still in my teens, and I wasn't very serious about helping like I would be now. I'd do most anything I could now to help anybody.
You didn't have Baby Ray then, did you? You know.
So
this is interesting because we often think of adult education as being something new, a new idea, that's come up, which I think proves that maybe there's nothing new. Your adult teaching was basically, though, at the elementary level. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
How long did you handle it?
Oh, I just kept it up a few weeks, and I even taught some of them music. I taught. We had singings. Oh my, we had people that would come and have a session of singings, and they had shaped notes so that those people could sing by note, because they learned the shapes of the notes that told them what key it was in, what tone it would be. Yeah, I have some of those old songbooks here now, shaped notes.
What would be the curriculum of the your elementary class? I presume that's first through sixth grade. How many courses of study would you try to give them?
I think I just had first three grades. They weren't. I had some beginners, and I just had to use my own ingenuity because we didn't have equipment like is furnished nowadays.
What sort of seats did they have?
Oh, they had regular a desk, and there'd be two sitting in one seat. It was a double seat, and two people sat in the same seat.
Now, you went from the country school to Okla town, is that correct?
Well, I didn't. I quit teaching. I got married then. That was in the neighborhood of Okla.
I see. Was your husband, was that the electric company?
The electric? Oh, yes, A.W. White Electric Motors and Machinery.
When did he found that company?
Well, I was married to him 57 years. He passed away in March this year.
When did he found the electric company?
Well, right after we were married.
So that would mean that the company would have been
well, pretty close to 60 years.
Nearly 60 years. Yeah. Probably about 1912 or 13.
Well, I don't remember exactly. He was working he was working for Hirsch and Tanner, the Oklahoma Electric Supply people, when we got married.
And was he active with A.W. White Electric until his death?
Well, yes, but he was an invalid 4 years before he passed.
You were talking about the Pilgrim Congregational Church. We might go into that just a little bit. Could you tell a little bit about your historian, I believe, for Pilgrim Congregational, about the church as it was and then as it is today, by comparison?
Well, Congregationalists always have believed in education. They started Yale and Harvard and 35 big universities and colleges, and so the ones that started it way back in 1889 were educated people. My mother was a graduate of Mount Holyoke and had taught 5 years in Cape Town, South Africa, and started normal training schools, 3 normal training schools in South Africa. So she was, my folks were educated, and there were a good many people that were educated that came here in 1889.
Now, I believe the Mayflower Congregational grew out of Pilgrim Congregation, is that correct?
Yes, our minister left our church and started another one.
That's Dr. Whitehouse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We need more congregational churches. In fact, way back in 1889, there were several congregational churches over the state of Oklahoma, but some of them are still in existence, and some of them have dropped to the wayside.
Do you know how many are in the state now?
No, I don't know. I'm not so informed.
Sure.
I've been dropping out instead of promoting.
Do you have, having been involved in education in the earlier days, although not through all of the years, do you have, and also your mother having been the first teacher, do you have any observations or feelings about education as it is today, say, compared with the earlier days?
Well, I think things have advanced. I don't think we're going backwards. I think they have newer methods of teaching. If that's what you mean.
Ms. White, after you left Hera, you came back to Oklahoma City. Where did you live when you came back?
Well, we had that house that my folks had built at 425 Southwest 2nd. Of course, it was called Washington Street then, and Washington School was just across the street. And that's where I went to school. My sister and I went to Washington School. Miss Fox was the principal. And that's a good many of the city officials lived farther south than I did. But as soon as they opened up new areas, well, of course they'd move and get in new houses, and that's in a terrible rundown condition
This
now.
is in the proposed urban renewal area.
That's right. That's
now.
It's not going to be. The urban renewal won't take it over for several years.
It's practically right under I-40, isn't it? Very close to it.
To what?
To I-40, the Stanley Draper Expressway. The East-West Expressway runs.
Yeah, that's just half a block from our old home.
Are these homes being torn down now in that area? Or most
Well,
of
a lot of them are falling down, and it's a bad residential neighborhood now.
As people began to move out of that neighborhood, what area were they? Now this would be in the between 1910 and 1920 or 1925. What area were people moving into?
Well, as the town grew, it went east across the tracks. There was a branch of our Congregational Church that started over on 6th and Harrison, and it was called the Harrison Avenue Congregational Church. And then I believe it was 1920, they had to get out of there because business was taking over, and they came over here at where the Congregational Church, Pilgrim Congregational Church is now on, I guess it's the 900 block on, between 13th and 14th, and then they changed, and of course the old Pilgrim Congregational Church, they had to get away from Noble and Harvey, so we merged, and we came up here.
When did people begin to move into this area where we are now? This was probably the preceded Nichols Hills or preceding Crown Heights, actually.
That's right.
When did they begin to settle this area?
Well, I don't know. We've lived in this house 36 years. We owned it before we moved in.
You all didn't build it, did you?
No. This was built by one of the bankers, and it's known as the Dan Lackey home. He was once a mayor. And next door lived Street and Draper, the Draper that started Street and Draper. That's on the west of me, and on the east of me was old Dr. Jolly. He was the first surgeon in Oklahoma City.
This was actually the finest area in Oklahoma City for quite some time, and of course today is. Isn't this a part of the historical preserve area?
That's right. I think they call it Heritage.
Heritage Hills.
Something about that.
This is actually an old area that has been kept up very nicely and has been many old homes preserved, which might have been torn down if people had not made the effort to preserve them as others that has been kept up very nicely and has been many old homes preserved which might have been torn down if people had not made the effort to preserve them as others began to move farther north. Now, I believe that I suspect Crown Heights was about the next area that people began to move north into. Is that right?
Oh, I don't remember.
You don't
I
remember?
guess. I didn't pay much attention to.
Uh-huh.
I had 5 kids that I was trying to take care of, and I didn't
have much time.
I went to Ladies Music Club and McDowell Club and Art League and all such as that, but
Tell us about the ladies. How were you a charter member of the Ladies
no,
Music Club?
No, I wasn't a charter member.
Were you near to that?
No, I don't think
I
so.
see.
My children were all musical, and I just paid my new membership yesterday to stay in it another year, but
Were you active in the Ladies Music Club?
No, my children were.
What about the McDowell Club? Were you active in it?
Well, I show my art once a year. That's about.
Is this your own art?
Oh yes.
When did you learn painting?
I went back to OCU and took art just for the heck of it.
When was that?
First thing I knew, they gave me a diploma. So I had credits around different places, Deadman and all, but I didn't get my degree until my oldest daughter got her degree before I did. So.
Do you have you sold any art?
Oh, I haven't. I just keep what I paint. I give it away. I don't try to sell. I've never sold but a few things, and wish I had those back.
Where have you displayed your art?
Well, McDowell Club has one day a year where we show something we've painted, and of course I used to. I show at the Red Ridge Art Museum out on 5500 Lincoln when something comes up. And I belong to Kappa Pi National Art Fraternity, and we're supposed to keep painting something every year.
I notice you have a lot of Oriental art, I believe, and a lot of Oriental figurines. Are these Japanese?
No, they're Chinese.
They're
I have 2 or 3 Japanese things, but I prefer the Chinese.
How did you become interested in those?
Well, I've always been interested in it, and then I took as my project when I was taking art out to OCU. I took Chinese art, and I did this screen here.
Oh, did you draw that?
Out there. But I've collected ever since I was a kid. I've got things that I picked up, maybe a little cloisonné vase for 50 cents. It's worth maybe $30 today. I've always been interested in.
Outside of the McDowell Club and the Ladies Music Club, have you had an involvement with any other area, Symphony or any of those?
Well, I've always contributed and paid into the Arts Center, and I go, but I don't take an active part now because I've had responsibilities in the house here that I had to.
Have you, were you active in the early years of the Symphony?
Not especially active, no. Just bought a ticket and had my kids going, and they used to usher, and I'd get them down to do what they were supposed to do, and of course I used my car to transport people, but I didn't take personal interest in things. I never was a big figure to show off doing things. did my little work sort of secretly.
Mm-hmm.